Good morning, everybody, and welcome to number 8, Thursday, December 8th, 2020 of the news you're never going to find in the news because the news no longer reports the news. They just follow the narrative. Just wanted to flip through some of these reminders. As always, we're going to be doing some journalisming today. Welcome to day 269 of 15 days to slow the spread. Please don't trust me. Please don't trust anyone. Please go out there and do your own research. Find out the answers for yourself. Here we promise only one thing, the truth. So what's the truth? Well, hopefully it's facts. Hopefully it's data. Hopefully it's evidence. Hopefully it's proof. Hopefully it's statistics. Hopefully it's a conglomeration of those in some way, shape, or form. So today's topic is lockdowns. Do they work? What are they all about anyway? But first, yesterday, we talked about the possibility of mandatory vaccinations, and number 7, about our line. Well, I forgot to put this in there, but I still wanted you to see it. Fox 5, New York legislation could make COVID-19 vaccination mandatory. So there's already been a bill that's been introduced in the New York state legislation. There you go. So let's get into this. Thank you to our contributor today. His name is Michael P. Sanger. I got a link to him in Twitter because this dude, he's a lockdown maven. I don't even know if that's the right thing to say, but he's the man when it comes to lockdown. So he says that COVID lockdowns aren't science, they are CCP propaganda. CCP is the Chinese Communist Party. So see my pinned article for key details. He's an attorney. He's an author of a book called, or whatever he's calling it, China's Global Lockdown Propaganda Campaign. We're not necessarily going to go into the Chinese stuff. We're just kind of going to go over the facts that we've seen, at least through news articles, about how terrible lockdowns are for the planet. So here we go. This is probably the most epic thread I've ever seen in my life on Twitter. Number 1 of a thread. Lockdowns, what we've done. Saying Michael, my work is sometimes criticized for not discussing the merits of lockdown, perhaps even exculpating, I'm assuming that's how you say that word, Western leaders for blaming the Chinese Communist Party. Others know better. This thread is for the victims of lockdown, the greatest crime of the 21st century. Over 60% of business closures from lockdowns are now permanent. So he states a fact there. He has some Yelp data from CNBC, 60% of business closures due to the coronavirus pandemic. So I talked about businesses being closed yesterday, and I wanted everybody to see this yesterday, but it applies today too. So over there on the left, I included a Bloomberg article from a few days ago right there. You can read it in black and white. Restaurant closings top 110,000. That's just restaurants, and that's just in the United States, much less how many other businesses out there. So leaders across the world transformed into tyrants, believing they had a right to bankrupt their subjects, is the core of evil lockdown. Number 3 in this thread. Nearly half of Black-owned small businesses have been wiped out. And then he links a Forbes article with stats, facts, figures, data to back up those claims. 4, unemployment in the U.S. reached as high as almost 15%, and highways have jammed with thousands of vehicles awaiting their turn at food banks. Links a New York Times article to prove. Nearly 5% of the population of the UK went hungry during the first 3 weeks of lockdown. Financial Times article, 3 million go hungry in UK because of lockdowns. A survey found that 22% of Canadians were experiencing high anxiety levels, of 4-fold increase from before the lockdowns, while the number reporting symptoms of depression doubled to 13%. And then global news from Canada. More than 40 states have reported increases in opioid-related mortality, with a link to the American Medical Association. Number 8, and per CDC, despite mass PCR testing, which we've talked about before, if you want to watch that, I would advise you to watch that, and disproportionate false positives, at least almost 101,000 excess deaths in 2020 were not even linked to COVID-19 at all. In other words, over 100,000 Americans were murdered this year by their own government. Then a link to a CDC. Though at risk from the virus itself, young people bore an outsized share of the burden. More than 70% of adults aged 18 to 23 said they experienced common symptoms of depression. CDC article, or CNBC article. Link there. CDC revealed that young adults aged 25 to 44 years saw the largest increase in excess deaths from previous years, a stunning 26.5% jump, despite accounting for fewer than 3% of deaths from COVID. CDC numbers. In Ireland, reports of rape and child sex abuse nearly doubled. And then the Irish Times is linked there. I'm sure that's applying in many other places around the world. Suicides jumped to unprecedented levels around the world. We've never seen numbers like this in such a short period of time, said Walnut Creek's Dr. Mike. It's a great last name, but I'm not even going to try to butcher it. I mean, we've seen at least a year's worth of suicide attempts in the last 4 weeks. A year's worth of suicide attempts in the last 4 weeks. ABCnews7.com. September of 2020 has been the highest month ever that we've seen suicidal patients admitted to our medical center, said Kia Carter, MD, medical director of psychiatry at Cook Children's Hospital. CBS Austin, it looks like. In Japan, government statistics show suicide claimed more lives in October than COVID-19 did over the entire year to date. When I saw that one just blew my mind. It's terribly sad. CNN. And despite being at virtually no risk from COVID as a result of lockdowns, children have suffered the most of all. Nearly 1 in 4 children living under lockdown are dealing with anxiety, with many at risk of lasting psychological distress. In recent surveys of over 6,000 children and parents in the U.S., Germany, Finland, Spain, and the U.K. by Save the Children, up to 65% of the children struggled with boredom and feelings of isolation. Children's health and intellectual development has regressed. Some who were potty trained before lockdowns have reverted to diapers, and others have forgotten basic numbers or how to use a knife and fork, reports The Guardian. I'm sure that's the UK. American children over the age of 10 have engaged in 50% less physical activity during lockdown. Not shocking at all in any way, shape, or form. The Economist. Achievement gap has widened and early literacy has declined. Makes perfect sense because the folks in poverty aren't going to be getting the schooling that the folks who are not in poverty that can afford private schooling or can afford not to go to work and do it themselves, hire a tutor. Whatever's going on out there, from the Washington Post. And most horrifyingly of all, a study from the United Kingdom found that that's almost a 1,500% rise in the incidence of abusive head trauma among children over the course of COVID-19 crisis. These are not statistics, they're old friends, loved ones, and intelligent human beings with thoughts, feelings, and dreams whose lives have been needlessly destroyed by our own government's policies. But while these statistics in developed nations may be horrifying, they pale in comparison to the suffering of untold millions in the developing world, cast into starvation and poverty as a result of our lockdowns. In India, millions of stranded workers lost their livelihoods and marched in exodus to far-off villages. Wall Street Journal. In South Africa, food lines stretched for miles. So this is the YouTube clip I just added here on the left. So let's check it out.
Thousands of people lined up for nearly 2.5 miles for emergency food parcels in the South African city of Centurion on Wednesday. A number of businesses donated 8,000 food hampers, which were given out to residents in the informal settlement of Mooiplaas. South Africa has spent 5 weeks under tough restrictions requiring most of the population to stay at home, apart from making essential trips. The measures have left many struggling to make ends meet in the recession-hit economy. The country is planning to reopen its agriculture sector and allow some manufacturing and retail to resume on Friday, as it seeks to balance the need to restart economic output and curb the spread of the virus, which is...
Did they say the line was 2.5 miles long? Quarantine migrants in Saudi Arabia were left to die. The guards just throw the bodies out back as if it was trash. The value of a human life, right? Doesn't seem to be valued there, unfortunately. UK Telegraph. The United Nations forewarned of a famine of biblical proportions, with 265 million people literally marching to the brink of starvation. That's, 60 million less than the entire population of the United States, maybe? The UN later estimated that the crisis had pushed an additional 150 million children into multi-dimensional poverty, deprived of education, health, housing, nutrition, sanitation, and water. What's going on, folks? What's going on? All this for a virus that caused no above-average mortality in countries without lockdowns, and which the WHO, World Health Organization, estimates already infected 10% of people worldwide by October. In other words, all for absolutely nothing. Lockdown supporters may cower from these facts, but that doesn't make them any less real. Journalists pretend to fool each other, disassociating by attributing these travesties to the pandemic instead of lockdowns. But God is not fooled. So he's saying that these are not because of the pandemic. All these problems are from lockdowns. And there's a little video, about a half-hour documentary about the Holocaust. I'm not going to show it because you can watch it on your own if you would like to. I'm sure it's worth the watch. All right, number 30, last but not least, due to the Chinese Communist Party's lockdown fraud, basically saying that because he says that we picked it up from them, millions of lives have been destroyed and millions murdered by their own governments. The CCP and its enablers must be held accountable to stop lockdowns, ensure they never happen again, and see that justice is done. Then he has a link to another thread that gets a lot more into China, but we're not going to get into that today, maybe another time. But it's another epic thread. So that was it. That was today. Number 8, Thursday, December 10th, 2020. Do they work? I don't know. I guess it depends on what their objective is. Hopefully we figured out maybe not what they're all about, but at the very least, they're unbelievably apocalyptic, detrimental effects to the human population. Thank you for helping us upset the social order. Thank you for helping us push back against the narrative. Hopefully we were able to fulfill our one promise of providing you the truth. But once again, do not trust me. Don't trust anyone. Go out there, do your own research, figure all this stuff out for yourself, because I could be just doing nothing more than spitting into the wind.